Hey, part 2, this week's show, 3-ball walk, Bob, Eddie, Julio.
How you doing?
College baseball, college softball, wrapping it up.
Our studio audience is here.
Oh, and our studio audience.
Yes.
Thanks, studio audience. It was a little late, but it was a little delay
okay.
there for the studio audience.
It's okay.
She's not as excited as she usually is.
Well, it's just the second session, so she's
Well,
already heard
she's-
one.
Right.
Yeah.
She already heard one.
Doing her homework.
Yeah, she is that.
So, yeah, college softball starts their regionals tomorrow,
Yes.
all over the place.
If you're in the Gainesville
College
area,
baseball,
yes.
last regular weekend season, then they'll start their regionals in about 2 weeks after a lot of conference tournaments next week
Okay.
and everything like that. It's kind of exciting here. I want to say 2 teams in the top 4 in the country,
Not bad.
Not bad.
and all surrounded by pitching,
Absolutely.
and you live and die by pitching.
You do live and die by pitching. So, you ready for my rant?
Rant
So-
of the week.
Here's the rant of the week. Who's the number 1 team in softball?
The Florida Gators.
Nope. They are not the number 1 team.
Oh,
They're the number 1 seed,
they're the number 1 seed.
but
So
they're not the number 1 team.
on both polls, they're not. Both polls.
On any poll. 3
Really?
polls. They are not number
They
1.
got jumped by,
They got jumped.
by Minnesota.
By Minnesota.
Is it Minnesota? Which is kind of
And
funny.
this is my rant.
The rant.
How is it that Minnesota is number 1 in the country?
And
They have 50 wins.
I didn't realize that.
3 losses. They're number 11 in the RPI, so you can't use that as the reason why. And they are not a ranked team.
They're not playing it, and they
Not only
send
are they
them to
not
Alabama.
ranked, they've got to play at Alabama
That's
as the
ridiculous.
number 2 seed in that region.
Well-
if they win that region, they've got to come to Florida and play the number 1 seeded team in Florida. That is totally unfair. I want to use another word, but I won't. It's totally
Initials, you can do
unfair.
initials if you want.
No, I won't. It's totally unfair for Minnesota to have that kind of year. And this is the statement.
Now,
I want you to. I want to
One
read
thing
you
before
the
you do that, and
statement.
I do want you to tell, is if you are not going to, okay, the Florida part of it and everything like that, if you are one of the teams that do not get in to be able to host, if you're not one of the top 16, the one you want to play is the 16 seed because supposedly that's the worst of the bunch. So they have to play Alabama. Well, I'd rather play the 16. Now, should
No.
Alabama be the 16 seed? That's what I have a problem with. Alabama's like the number 10 team in the country, win 1 game in the SEC tournament, and then get eliminated by the same team that knocked out Florida.
Alabama's
and all of a
15th
sudden-
in the RPI.
Okay.
They're 15th in the RPI.
Where's Ole Miss? Where's Kentucky? Where's all those other teams in the SEC?
Kentucky is 17th. Ole Miss is
Okay.
18th.
Okay.
But Ole Miss
But
beat
beca-
them.
During the regular season?
Yes, and they beat them. And they beat them in the tournament.
So
I
then.
think this is off.
Oh,
It's still working.
Okay.
We're still
Okay.
working. We're just not.
Sorry.
We can't. see
okay,
it live.
but here's your Minnesota rant.
All right.
So Minnesota's number 1. I thought that would happen.
And
They
here's
had
the-
3 losses.
and
They
here-
haven't played anybody.
that's not
They didn't
exactly
have to play
true.
Michigan. They didn't have to play Michigan in the Big Ten, and Michigan's the only decent
They
team
did
in the
play
Big
Michigan. They beat Michigan, and they beat
Not
Illinois
during the regular season,
Yes, they
they
did.
didn't.
They
Ten.
had
They
them.
didn't.
We'll look it up.
I don't think they
Pretty
played
sure
them.
they did. All right. So this is it. This is what the NCAA said.
We got quotes here.
We
I know.
spoke. This is from their statement on Monday from the softball selection committee, which I tried to find out who was on that committee.
So you could write him a letter and get suspended from being a fan, but go on.
No, that's another story. Statement from them. The NCAA Division I softball committee spoke at length over a 3-day span about the University of Minnesota's softball team, noting that many factors were considered regarding team seeding and that the final decision was difficult. Okay, as a part of the selection criteria, the committee reviews each team's body of work individually when selecting the field of 64 teams for the softball tournament. When selecting the top 16 seeds of the committee emphasized a team performance against top 25 teams along with other variables including strength of schedule. The problem with that statement is the RPI is 75% based on your strength of schedule.
And you're
And you can't determine who's going to be in the top 25 when you're setting your schedule, and you can't determine who's going to be in the top 25 of your conference.
They didn't.
So that
bottom
is
line,
absolutely bogus.
They're out of conference even
They
before the
traveled
season.
to Texas. They traveled to Oregon. They traveled to California.
Washington.
They traveled to Washington.
Do you have it there?
I'm looking at it right now.
Give me the score when they played Michigan, the only decent team, and Illinois is.
And they played Ohio State, which is a tournament team. Ohio State's another team. Illinois, Ohio State.
Illinois, they were 2-1 against Illinois.
Right. They lost one of the three against Illinois.
Illinois is a powerhouse.
And they lost 2 of the 3 to Washington. The other 2 they lost to Washington.
And who else am I looking for? Wisconsin?
They beat Oregon?
Michigan.
I think they played Oregon State, actually. I think it was in Corvallis.
Okay.
But
So they didn't play Oregon.
they didn't play Oregon. But that's
No
not
Michigan
the point.
there.
But that's not the point.
They never played Michigan the whole
The
year.
point is, you are 50-3. You're ranked
No,
number one in the country.
I totally
You're
agree
ranked
with you.
number
Yeah, I agree
11 in
100%.
RPI. Now, if their RPI was outside of the top 16,
I totally
then
agree.
I would agree with that. I would say, okay, they don't deserve to be a number one. But their RPI is 11. James Madison's RPI is 13. Now, you know me, I'm an SEC guy, but there is no way that 8
So
SEC
do you believe?
teams should
Do
be
you believe?
hosting.
Do you believe that a certain friend of mine a few years back in the College World Series was very upset with the way that Arizona State was getting favored by calls and everything, and it appeared
Absolutely.
that the Pac-10 at the time, or 12, or however many they got.
Well, the Pac-12 now has 3 of the top 8.
But
They got-
but
I mean,
can
they
you
have
sit
5
there
of
and
the top
say
8.
the
4 of the top
SEC is being looked down upon and the Pac-12 is still the powers that be, according to what that guy
Yes.
said at that
All right,
time?
Because
No.
here's the problem. The Pac-12 has 5 of the top 8 seeds, or 5 of the top 10 seeds. Okay, so the SEC got the back end of the 16.
So they're traveling on the super regionals.
so they're having to go.
But are
on
those
Super
teams
Regionals.
top 8 teams in the country?
They're as much as some of the teams that won from the Pac-12 are, because the Pac-12 didn't play anybody outside of it, and they don't even play a tournament. They just play each other one more weekend. But the point of the matter is,
But
is
the
that
Big Ten is
there's-
basically needs
Big
to
Ten is
earn the
getting-
respect
No.
that you said,
you got Michigan that's won a national championship,
and they
out of
didn't
that
play them
conference. Well, that's fine, but they still won out of that conference.
because
You've got the ACC has 1 team in it, and the SEC got too many teams in the top 16, in my opinion. I don't think that every team. I don't think Georgia should have been a top 32 team. They're not that great. I don't think South Carolina should have been that. I don't think either Kentucky or LSU shouldn't have hosted.
correct. But here's the problem, and I'm with you. But here's the problem with not making Georgia a top 32 team. Okay? We're the 14th team in the country, or we're the 3rd team in the country, or whatever it is, and Georgia is the number 3 seed in my regional. Boy, you just hosed me.
All right, so here's
the reason they make Georgia one of the top 32 is because then someone's going to have Georgia and someone better than them as
they
the
don't.
2 seed in
No,
that.
they don't. No, they don't. Georgia is the 2nd best team in the regional. for
Sure,
them.
but they're the 2 seed, right?
they're the 2 seed.
That's why.
But they're
if they weren't top 32, they'd be the 3 seed, and you'd
no,
be
they
bringing.
wouldn't. No, that's not the way it works. I looked at that today.
How does it work?
All right, so
I don't
this is
know.
an average. I took the 4 teams and their RPIs and averaged them for every one of the regions.
They seed them now, 1 through 6, and supposedly as crazy
wrong.
as it is.
They don't really, but they're supposed to, because it never matters that. If you want to just go by the toughest one of the regionals, Utah plays the toughest regional. Ole Miss plays the 2nd toughest. Baylor, Kentucky, UCLA, Washington, Tennessee, and then the easiest regional is Texas A&M, who's a number 9 seed.
Right, but they wanted to put all those Texas teams in there.
Right, and that's not fair.
And the reason, by the way, I know you guys are tuned in to listen about baseball, but the same thing is going to happen in
It's going to happen in baseball too.
Yeah.
So here's the
we're
if you
covering it right
threw out the last 2 teams, because like Florida's
tune
playing
in?
Florida's playing Florida
They tune
A&M, and Florida A&M
They
is
tune in?
229th, but they won their conference tournament, so they
Right.
get in. They're under 500. It's just that's a whole other thing. But can you imagine what would happen if these are the 2 teams that go along? You throw out the other 2 teams. You just take the top 2 teams. The differential between the number 1 seed and the number 2 seed in RPIs. The toughest one, again, is Utah. They have to play it. There was 1. They were one away. Then LSU, Baylor, Alabama, because Alabama has Minnesota, which Minnesota is number 11 and actually higher than than Alabama. That's one of those things you don't figure out how that works. And then you go down, and the easiest one is UCLA. UCLA plays, they're number 3 in RPI. The number 2 seed there is Cal State Fullerton, which is a 48 RPI.
48. But they got the LA schools in there.
And then you've got 48, and then you've got 55 with San Jose State, and then you've got Lehigh. Lehigh's not a California school.
Nope, they didn't have to send them there.
And they're there, and Lehigh is the 72nd school.
But they're high.
It makes no sense when you
start. They're not Lee Low.
Yeah, right.
High.
When you start sending teams away, like you send Princeton to Florida State, you should have had James Madison hosting. You send Fordham away. All the teams have to travel away. This is absolutely garbage from the NCAA.
And they'll do the same thing.
They'll do the same thing in baseball, and they'll keep doing it as long as people say it's okay, and it's not okay. And if I was Washington, if I was Minnesota, or if I was James Madison, I'd be probably getting barred from the NCAA from what I would say to them in a letter.
So as someone who doesn't follow women's softball as
deja vu
vigilant
all over
as
again, as Yogi said.
When they have the number 1 seeds, doesn't it make sense for the number 1 seed to host the regional?
The number 1 seed does host the regional. But see, that's the problem. Is the committee reseeded them. They're not the number 1 seed.
Oh, I think you said they were. I'm sorry.
They're the number 1 team.
Number 1 team
in the polls,
right?
And the coaches poll.
And they're the number 2 seed at the Alabama regional.
And they're the number 2 seed, which means technically they're
17th.
Yeah, they're 17th team. They're the 17th best team.
Because they go 1 through 16, and then 17 plays 16.
Supposedly, but that's.
But they could have. Now, question for you. If all of a sudden, and this is an easy fix, if all of a sudden Minnesota hosts that regional, Alabama's the number 2 seed there, are you happy with that?
I don't know that I'm happy with that. I mean, they're number 11. They should have been an 11 seed.
Right. And that's what I'm telling you. All of a sudden, and Kentucky lost in the first game how Kentucky and Ole Miss jumped Alabama, I have no clue.
Well,
because they wanted that Florida-Alabama matchup because they didn't play last year.
Right.
Same as Georgia didn't play Florida last year, and they wanted that matchup.
Well, when you have 13 teams in from one conference, there's only 3 regionals that doesn't have an SEC team in it. So obviously the regionals and super regionals, if they all win, they're going to start canceling each other out. You can't do anything about that. I understand that. But you can look at that. They sent Oklahoma State here because Gajewski was coach here.
Sure.
Him and Tim are friends.
But they do that in basketball as well.
Yeah, it's just dumb. It's just
John Kruger
dumb.
winds up coaching against Florida in the NCAA tournament.
It's just dumb to do it that way because you
but they got to send someone.
But you don't have to send Oklahoma State here. Let Oklahoma State, if they win a super regional, come here. And then you got a better story. You got a more compelling story.
But they're not going to be a one. They're not going to win the super regional.
You never know. You never know. So you're going to send them here to play a game against a good friend and against a coaching legacy, which makes it hard on the coach like Walton, who loves his friend, but has to beat him and knock him out of the tournament.
So then, I agree. If you're the 1 seed, they should just let you advance to the super regional without having to beat anybody. No emotion.
No, but you don't.
You can play Florida A&M.
There's 64 different teams. There's 63 other teams they could have sent here as a number 3 seed.
Yeah, but that creates a story, dude.
And then they sent FIU here, which 2 teams in the top 39.
And you know the one thing it does? It gets people talking about it.
They should be 2 teams in the top 39. They play 1, you play, then you go, bam, 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 and then the 1 seed gets the 32 seed.
1 should play 32, right, but they're not.
And then the next guy in there is the 33 seed.
But we're not. But
so we actually got a little favorable draw. Instead of 1, 32, and 33, we got, 138,
It's easier, but when you think about the super regionals, you're going to play Alabama or you're going to play Minnesota.
Yeah.
And those 2 teams, Minnesota's not a number 16 team.
No, you're right.
Minnesota should have been in like 10, 11 spot there.
But Florida's not getting hosed there.
No, I'm not saying Florida's getting hosed.
Alabama is.
I don't think Alabama is. I don't think Alabama deserves to be hosting, actually. I think Alabama ought to have to be traveling. So I think
Minnesota.
I think Alabama got a benefit of being in the SEC to host. And I think Kentucky did. And Minnesota got hosed and James Madison. Those are the 2 teams, James Madison and Minnesota. If they were hosting, whatever else would have been there, you could argue. But those 2 teams, there's no way you cannot argue about those. Hey, somebody call.
Yeah, call.
Somebody called in. We'll check with that in a minute. So
they got questions.
Let us know what you think. Right in.
We'll
Let's-
find
That
out.
was a 7-minute rant. I've ranted louder. I've ranted more emotionally, but never longer.
That's true, and I'll rant more about it if it continues. The SEC needs, the NCAA needs to fix it. So, watch some baseball this weekend. Watch some softball on TV. You'll like it. I promise you. You might
Come to
like it more.
Gainesville.
You might like it more than baseball. That's the problem.
This weekend will be good.
It's fun.
It'll be fun.
2 top 10 teams playing for the SEC championship.
Yep. We didn't even get into that one. We'll cover that next week. Who won? We'll see
Hey,
you guys.
thanks for coming. Play ball.
Peace.